Well, I'm joined today by Elizabeth Rose of the newly launched L&M Medilaw. Elizabeth is an accredited specialist by the Law Society of Scotland in relation to the field of medical negligence, clinical negligence. How are you, Elizabeth?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm looking forward to hear legal insights with you today. The purpose of this series is to provide a little bit of education for people who are studying law, thinking about studying law at university, even in the profession, who basically are interested in the field of medical negligence or what people do in different areas of law they don't know much about. So you're a perfect person to give us a little bit of insight as to what life is like as a medical negligence solicitor. So tell me, what is it like? Why have you chosen to specialise in this area, and what's your day like as a medical negligence lawyer?
So I am a bit of a frustrated doctor. So when I was at school, I kind of toyed with the idea of studying medicine, but then realised that I wasn't that great at science. I was okay at biology, but when it came to like chemistry and physics, I just was below par. I wasn't good enough. So I was much better at English, modern studies, history, those kind of subjects. So I chose to study law. And I did my traineeship at a personal injury firm, and I loved that. And I loved the medical side of personal injury cases. And then I did a bit of mental health law, which was really, really interesting. And that was a lot of advocacy work, so a lot of appearance work, which was really good. Because of personal injury work, a lot of the cases settle, so you don't get much court experience. So the mental health stuff gave me an opportunity to, be on my feet and argue a case and things like that, which was really good. But I did miss personal injury world. I really missed consulting with the experts. I missed the clients. You got very close to the clients. Some of the cases are quite lengthy, so you develop a relationship with the family if it's a fatal case. And then I got offered an opportunity doing exclusively medical negligence. Now, I'd already done bits and bobs, and I really, really loved it. There's something about consulting with the top cardiac surgeon, and he's telling you about beating heart surgery and the amazing things they can do, and he's showing you the diagrams. He's showing you such, giving you, opening up a world to you that you never would have seen. And because I already was quite interested in medicine, I loved it. I just, took to it like a duck to water. And I really, really liked the clients as well, because they had experienced such awful medical trauma, and they're coming into the legal world, but they were really resilient, and you would learn so much from them. A lot of them had such good attitudes, even though such horrible things had happened to them or their family. And I learned a lot from the clients. And I just really, really enjoyed how the medical world and the legal world came together. And I felt like every case is very different, although it's very niche, which I think is a strange thing to kind of grapple with. Although it's very, very niche, like one day you'll get a cardiac case, one day you'll get a thyroid case, one day you'll get an orthopedic case, pediatric medicine, adult medicine, and it's totally different. Every expert is, it's so different, and you have to kind of submerge yourself in that particular case. So if it's cardiac thoracic surgery, for instance, you would have to learn about that operation, you would have to learn about the lead up, you would have to learn about the examination that should have taken place, all these things. And then you go on to your next case, it might be a psychiatric case, you've got to learn all about, what's a safe discharge, what's safe discharge planning, the crisis team in the community, how does that liaise with the inpatient team? So you just learn so much from each individual case. And I don't ever feel like bored, because every case is very different, and the kind of personalities are very different, because I represent people from every walk of life you can imagine. Anybody can experience medical negligence. Anybody, it doesn't matter if you're high income, low income, medium income. It affects all ethnicities. So I think, it's not as if I'm dealing with one certain demographic, and that's really good. I'm hearing from different people, different points of view. So I think it's a really exciting area of law, and I really, really love it. I wouldn't do anything else.
Well, that's brilliant. I mean, clearly you've got a passion for the work that you do, which is key to everything. I think that's one of the things we always try to talk about in Hey Legal, is identifying areas and having passion for the work that you're involved in. So tell me this, what is your day like as a medical negligence lawyer? I mean, for example, are you going to court a lot? Are you spending days in consultations? How does it all play out?
So it's varied. So I spend a lot of time speaking to clients. Whether it's an initial statement, whether it's a witness statement, whether it's an update, it is very consultation heavy, because in a medical negligence case, you will have probably a large number of experts, and you will consult with each expert, sometimes with the family, sometimes without the family, and also with counsel. So there's a lot of consultations, there's lots of meeting new people and developing relationships with experts, because that's important, because you've got to be able to trust your expert. Obviously, they always have to be independent, but also you're giving them something that's very private, very confidential, and you're asking for their opinion on it. So you've got to trust the expert as well, and the family has to trust the expert. So you have lots of consultations. In terms of court, as case managed proceedings, which means that there are frequent procedural hearings, but it's not like being a criminal solicitor. I can imagine a criminal solicitor is every day you're in court, you're down in the cells, and it's very front facing all the time. It's not like this. It's very kind of almost like project driven work. Like it's leading up to the big day, which is the proof. Now, the evidential hearings can, minimum 2 weeks. You're normally about 3 weeks worth of evidence. So if you can imagine, it's the prep, it's the lead up to the big proof. Now, medical negligence, unfortunately, isn't like other personal injury cases where the defender will make an economic settlement, and most cases settle, and you can bet your bottom dollar this will set. It's not like that, because the health board will robustly defend cases, and you will find yourself proofing. I wouldn't say all the time, but you would have 1 to 2 big proofs a year, and they would be at least 2, 3, if not 4 weeks worth of evidence. So you can imagine the preparation time that goes into that. That's absolutely huge. On the lead up to proof, it's all hands on deck. You name it, we're doing it, in terms of taking a second, third witness statement, refining evidence, going through documents again, going through documents with the client, going through drug card exit, everything, to try and fully prepare it, because counsel will come to you with like a shopping list saying we need X, Y, and Z done, and you need to do it quickly, and then you would complete that, give it to counsel, then you would discuss it with counsel, and then you would discuss strategy. So there's a lot that goes into the lead up to a proof, and I think it's quite stressful, but also very exciting. The proofs are quite hard. I would say it's quite hard going for the client if they want to come and hear the evidence every day. So there's a lot of client management skills that are needed, a lot of just natural people skills, like sitting beside your client, reassuring them, updating them throughout the proof. We do like a debrief every day after the evidence. And I think that's critical, that the client kind of understands the proceedings, because medical negligence is very, very complicated. Even the judges, sometimes we have to strip it right back. Anatomy diagrams we have to bring in, I remember a cardiac case where we had to bring the picture of the heart, and it was beat like a video. We had to play it and explain this is this valve and this is the aorta, and things like this, because obviously the judges aren't doctors, and there isn't specialized medical negligence judges. So there's a lot of explaining that goes on, and sometimes even you might feel comfortable with it, but you've been living and breathing the case for 2 years or whatever. But these people, it's fresh to them. So there's a lot of that goes on in court, where counsel are doing their best to explain what is a very complicated medical type procedure, and then we have to apply the law to that procedure. So it is complicated, and some people would think, oh, it's very labour intensive, and you go into the real minutiae. But I love it, because I really like the medicine aspect. So to me, it's not a chore, because tell me more. Tell me more about the aorta. So I really, really like it. So it's horses for courses. It's something that just speaks to me. So I do really enjoy it.
As you talk, it does seem that you have managed to strike the perfect blend between medical and legal, because obviously it's both of those worlds combining. And as you talk as well, it makes me think of recordings that I do with Donald Finlay QC, where he routinely makes the point that if you're going to instruct and cross-examine expert witnesses, you have to understand their world. You have to understand the reports. You have to understand the procedures involved so that you can represent your client correctly. And clearly that's the case here, that you have to really combine both disciplines.
That's an excellent observation, and it's entirely true. You can't apply the law if you don't actually understand the subject matter. So you really do need to understand. And I will always, before when I was younger, I'd be a bit nervous saying to an expert, "Oh, I don't really understand this. Can you like walk me through this?" Whereas now I've got more confidence to say to Dr. X, can you just explain this to me, because I don't really understand this. And when you, because they just fly out with medical terminology, you know, and they'll abbreviate everything similar to what lawyers do. And I think the tendency when I was younger was to let it go and not quite understand it, whereas now I'll stop the consultation and say, look, I'm really, really sorry, but can you explain this to me? Like, dumb it right down for me, and then we can, I don't know, dumb it back up. I don't know if that's the expression, but make it more complicated. But we need to get to the essence. Explain it to me as if I'm like a first-year medical student, and they understand that, because a lot of them have taught students, so they'll then strip it back, and then I'll understand it, and then we can build on it. So I think it's just getting the confidence to put your hand up, like at school, and say, look, I don't understand this, can you help me? And be prepared to be a bit vulnerable in these consultations, and don't worry what people are going to think about you. Just, you know, you need to understand it. If you don't understand it, how are you going to explain it to the client? And then you're doing a disservice to your client if you don't understand the case. So I suppose it's just building on that confidence. And even if it is the top surgeon in the UK and like he's amazing, like everybody, I need to understand it, and he understands it, I need to understand it. So we always get there in the end, but some of the consultations are very long.
Yeah. Well, that brings me on to another point, which is that you've obviously talked about aspects of the job that you really like, you know, but what areas about your job are actually challenging and that you wish were perhaps different?
So you want to be successful in every case. You want to bring a successful outcome to your clients. Unfortunately, there is a minority of cases where no matter what you do, the case will not succeed in court, or you've gone to court and not succeeded. And delivering that news, I'm still like, I lost one proof fairly recently, about a year ago, and I had to deliver the news to the client, and I was holding back tears because I'd put everything into this case, and she so deserved to win. And I still got upset talking about it because I still believe that she should have won. It's going through the appeal courts, so fingers crossed. But the family were so deserving, and it's hard when you really believe in something and you don't understand why they didn't believe, not necessarily believe your client, but there wasn't sufficient evidence, or the evidence didn't play out the way you thought it was going to play out. So disappointing people is the worst thing about this job, because you want to bring everybody a result, and if you can't do that, it is really upsetting.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I suppose that's the essence of the lawyer, which is if the case isn't there, and I know these things are marginal and that this is what leads to appeals or whatever, but if the evidence isn't there, then you can't succeed, obviously. But it's obviously making sure you've presented evidence as best as it possibly can in the environment. So I'm sure, especially with the timeframes that are involved in medical negligence and the human element around it all, I'm sure that when outcomes aren't successful, that it's really challenging. So thank you for that. Are you able to tell our viewers and listeners about some of the interesting cases you've been involved in, please?
I think they're all really interesting, but I don't know if that's just because I'm really nerdy. I think they're really, really interesting. But I think one of the cases that strikes me as very memorable is a case that went to proof and we succeeded, was that the medical records contradicted the client's position. Now, ordinarily, when you've got a factual dispute, the court will always be persuaded by what's down in black and white in the medical records and what's been documented. So it's a really uphill battle to overcome this. But this client was an amazing person, and when he gave evidence, he did so well. He did better than I could have possibly done. and we succeeded. And the reason why it's so memorable to me is it kind of really struck home about how big an asset your client is to the case, and how sometimes just getting them front and centre and letting them tell their story is so, so important. And I think before that, I would have been more dismissive of a case where the medical records contradicted the client's position and say, well, you won't be believed, you know, and I would have been more pessimistic. But having seen that case and seen how amazing that he did, and he came to court every single day in his three-piece suit, and he was just a lovely person, and he did a great job, and everybody in that courtroom believed him that day. Everybody, because it was true. I mean, that was the essence of it. It was true. You know, from the day that I was instructed, the story never changed. And I think the truth is the truth. And when it comes out, it's very vindicating, isn't it? Like, you know, when I knew he was telling the truth, the court accepted it, and we succeeded, and it was like the best. Like, I remember when we got the judgment through, me and the trainee were hugging in the office. We were like so excited, because obviously that case was risky. It was risky, and we didn't know what would happen. But you know, everybody got behind us, counsel got behind us, and I think it was the client, because the client was such a special person that we all just really got behind him. And yeah, it was the best day ever.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. I mean, it's brilliant to be. There's always a professional balance to strike, obviously, but being emotionally invested in a case as well is obviously a great thing to have when you can. So talking about emotional investment, you have recently launched, and congratulations on that, L&M Medilaw.
Yes.
Which is, I'd like you to tell us a bit more about that, please. So why you've set that up. I think accessibility in particular is a key element around that. If you could maybe talk a bit more about that, please. And you've got a drop-in clinic as well, and using social and all of these interesting things. So you're bringing your passion to this new brand. So can you tell our viewers a bit more about that, please?
So I think one thing that kind of linked all my clients, because they were all from different walks of life, is trauma, and they've experienced medical trauma either themselves or their family member. So they come to me in a really fragile state, and they are quite vulnerable. But then they're catapulted into the legal process, which can be quite complicated, quite overwhelming. It's not particularly user-friendly. And I think it wasn't until I always knew that it was quite hard ask, you know, the things that we were expecting clients to be able to do after experiencing such trauma themselves, already kind of knew that it was a difficult process that we tried to make, you know, easier. But it wasn't until, unfortunately, my family experienced medical negligence and I became a client that it hit home that we could maybe be doing things a bit differently. We could maybe be a bit more gentle with the clients, and there was maybe a kinder approach without losing the expertise, without losing the results-driven approach, because ultimately we want to get a result for the client. So this kind of like planted a seed in my head, and having been in the client's shoes and experienced what they experienced, I started to think of what could we do. So very, very basic things came to my head, and things were like going to an appointment can be quite stressful because you don't know the environment. So my wee girl, unfortunately, suffered quite a serious injury, and it was a brain injury, and we were constantly at medical consultations, etc. And I would walk in as somebody that was fairly confident, fairly articulate, and educated, but I would come out and maybe have only retained 50% because I was quite excited, quite anxious going to it, not knowing what to expect. It was a different building. It was an individual I'd never met before. So I thought, well, that's the same for clients coming to solicitors. Going into solicitors' offices, it might be the first time they've ever met a solicitor. So I said, we'll do a video walkthrough. So I got our head of finance to stand outside the building, and we videoed him going in to the left and going into the reception and meeting me. And I thought, well, clients could watch that before they come and see me, just to make them feel a bit more settled, and feel a bit less anxious. So that was one of the ideas. Another idea was, because the court process is quite complicated and there's loads of different stages, I thought, well, is there a way that we could distill this down into something really user-friendly? And the kind of analogy I made was, when someone suffers like a wound, they get given like a picture, an infographic to say, like, this is how you look after the wound, step 1, step 2, phone us, and it's really, really easy to digest, and the compliance is better when they're given this infographic. So I said, well, could we do this for the law? So we employed a graphic designer and he did an infographic. It's on the website. We give it to clients when they come to me, and it's just essentially saying, you don't have to look at it, it's voluntary. But if you want to know about the process, which I'll obviously explain to you, you can use this as an educational tool. And it really breaks it down into a kind of bite-sized, easy to digest way, so that the clients can understand, right, we're at stage 1 and Elizabeth's going to get me to stage 2. And then after stage 2, we're going, it's a very simple idea, but I think it works really well. Another idea I had was, I feel that clients tell their stories over and over and over again. And this, I've had particularly vulnerable clients, and when they're telling their story over and over again, I wonder whether it's re-traumatizing them. And I did worry, because sometimes before they were getting to me, they've maybe told their story 4 or 5 times, and then they're exhausted by the time they come to me, and I can totally understand that. So I thought, well, is there a way that we could cut out all the other people and like get direct access to me? And could we do this digitally? And what I thought is, the analogy I had in my head was like Just Eat, like, you get a time slot, you get your milk delivered, it's very, very smooth. So they could do the same with me. So on Thursday afternoons and evenings, I dedicate this to new clients. They can pick a time, a date that's good for them. And it's literally just a case of, they fill in some questions, that gives them a Zoom invite, and then we're ready to go on the day, and they get a text reminder. So, we're all busy people, so it's trying to kind of manage that process. And then we go, and then I give them advice, and they haven't had to speak to anybody else. So when they're coming to me, they're fairly fresh, and it isn't as traumatic. It's just trying to, I suppose, not add to the client's trauma, and to be kinder, and to try and put yourself in the client's shoes and think, well, what would I want? And I have been in the client's shoes, and I feel like I can, think like a client. And why make things complicated? If we can simplify things and make things easier for people, let's do it. And that kind of flows into accessibility as well. We worked with a disability consultant. She was amazing. She's she's a really special person, and she helped us, structure the website in a certain way, being able to use a screen reader, all these kind of things to try and open up access to justice and include everybody. Because everybody deserves to, everybody should be included. That should just be like bare minimum standards. So yeah, I'm really proud of everything. I really am.
Well, that's brilliant, and congratulations, obviously, getting to the launch done, and all the work that you've done to get to that point. Sounds fantastic. And I think you intend to use social media.
Yes.
A little bit. So can you tell us, please, about that?
Well, I really like social media. So I love TikTok, and I love Instagram, and Facebook to a degree. I think I love following other lawyers. There's a lot of people down south that are doing this, and in America, and I think it's really interesting content. I think you can put out really good educational content that's of high quality, but is easy to digest and is like fun to watch, and isn't laborious. And I think there's really amazing examples of this, like people delivering the news via TikTok, and it's like the Washington Post, it's big papers, and they're doing it in a really, it's still in a classy way, and it's not inaccurate information that's getting presented, but it's just in a way that where particularly young people can log on and get their daily update, and I kind of on the train into their work. So I kind of wanted to do the same. It is totally new. I don't think it's been, I've not really seen examples in Scotland. So I'm hoping to kind of pioneer this and do a lot of social media content and do a lot of educational content and try and engage people, people that maybe want to study law, people that are, maybe thinking about the medical negligence process, or even just the court process. Like, what's it like giving evidence? Like, what can I expect? What's a courtroom like? Is it virtual or is it in person? Like simple, questions that I could answer, and hopefully is of use to someone. So that's the kind of plan with social media.
Well, that sounds brilliant, and I think there's a theme that runs through everything that you've told us, which is about, breaking down barriers, might be around the medical profession in terms of things possibly having gone wrong and people being able to find out what's actually happened. So there's breaking down barriers there. There's then understanding around the legal process and bringing people into that so that they don't feel traumatized by that, on top of what's happened to them in terms of their medical situation. And then here with social, there's an element of breaking down barriers through education and just showing the realities of your work and the way you are involved day in day in terms of trying to look after your clients. So it's all very interesting and brilliant, and I look forward to seeing how all of that plays out in the months ahead. So just as we finish up, so thank you for your time, but I suppose a question, if there's students who watch this and they'll have learned a lot through this, but what would you say to somebody who's thinking about this type of work? Would you recommend it, or would you say them to think about before committing in their head to saying, I'd really like to be a medical negligence lawyer? What should the thought process be?
Well, I would highly recommend it, but obviously there's a lot of bias there. But I think be true to yourself. What are you interested in? Like, if you really like, if you're the type of person that would watch an operation on TV and be very interested, but also, be very much interested in advocating for someone's position and standing up and outlining an argument, then I think medical negligence would be a perfect fit. If you've got a natural interest, then of course gravitate towards it. I think it's really interesting. I think there's lots of exciting things happening in the industry. So definitely I would recommend it. And I think just be true to what you actually are interested in. I know that beggars can't be choosers and traineeships. I mean, presumably it's still very competitive, and sometimes you've just got to do what you need to do in order to qualify. I completely understand that, but perhaps when you qualify, think like, what do you find interesting? What would you like to do? Because life is short, and you shouldn't really be doing something you don't enjoy. Because I think my passion translates, to the clients. But if you don't have that passion, it's false, and there won't be longevity in that career. So I think do what you're passionate about, do what is good for you, it feels good to you. I'm like a big believer in enjoying your job and not doing something just to pay the bills, clock in, clock out, because I think this job is vocational. So you've got to enjoy it, because there can be long hours, and there can be times where I'm not being able to bath my wee one and things like that. So the sacrifice has to be, it has to be good enough. It has to be enjoyable enough. It has to be something I feel strongly about in order to do that. So, don't be stuck doing something that you just don't like, that you have no passion for, because I think your life's too short. So that's what I would say in relation to that.
Well, that's brilliant. Wise words that cover both your career but also life. So much to ponder there, I'm sure, for our viewers. But thank you so much for your time. At Hey Legal, we wish you every success with L&M Medilaw.
Thank you for speaking to me.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you've been very busy, and I'm sure you now want to get back to looking after clients' interests. But Elizabeth Rose of L&M Medilaw, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.